a serial murderer and rapist as vile as has ever lived. In the 1970s and 80s, it's alleged he wreaked havoc all over the state of California, all the while evading capture.
A quiet neighborhood, a man no one suspected, and a nightmare that stretched across decades without a face. How does someone commit crimes for years without being caught once? How can a person live a normal life in the daytime while allegedly carrying out unimaginable acts at night? For more than 40 years, those questions haunted California. Because somewhere in those suburbs, an attacker was moving silently from house to house, leaving behind fear that never fully faded. Families changed the way they lived. Doors stayed locked. Sleep became difficult. And yet, the identity of the person responsible remained completely unknown. Until one day, everything changed. Joseph James D'Angelo was an older man living in a quiet suburban area. To people around him, he seemed ordinary, even forgettable. Some described him as unpleasant or bitter, someone who complained often and kept distance from others. Nothing about his daily life suggested anything beyond normal routine. But investigators would later connect him to something far darker. A name that had been circulating in fear and frustration for decades: the Golden State Killer. If the allegations were true, his crimes stretched across California during the 1970s and 1980s. A long trail of violence that included at least 13 murders, more than 50 sexual assaults, and a series of burglaries that left entire communities shaken. The scale alone made it one of the most disturbing cases in American history. But what made it even more terrifying was not just what happened, but how long it went on without answers. Back then, California was changing. New housing developments were growing. Suburban streets looked peaceful. Families believed they were safe inside their homes. But that sense of safety slowly began to disappear, because a pattern was forming. At first, it was reports of break-ins, then assaults, then more serious attacks. It started in one region and gradually spread to others. Police departments tried to connect the dots, but nothing pointed clearly to one suspect. The attacker seemed to move carefully, almost intelligently, avoiding patterns that could lead to identification. Residents began to live differently. People installed stronger locks. Some kept weapons nearby. Others stayed awake at night, listening for anything unusual. Fear slowly became part of daily life, and still no one knew who they were looking for. The attacker was organized, careful, and patient. Investigators later believed he had a strong understanding of law enforcement procedures. He seemed to know how police responded, how long it took, and how to disappear before anyone arrived. That level of awareness led detectives to consider something unsettling. He may have had experience in law enforcement or military training. One of the most disturbing parts of the case was not just the attacks themselves, but the psychological control involved. In some cases, victims reported that the attacker would contact them afterward, weeks or even months later, simply to remind them that he still had power over their lives. That kind of behavior left emotional damage that lasted far beyond the physical crimes. For survivors, life was never the same. A new approach finally changed everything. Investigators turned to genetic genealogy, a method that uses DNA not to find a direct match, but to identify relatives. By uploading the unknown DNA profile to public genealogy databases, they were able to locate distant family connections. From there, experts began building a family tree, slowly narrowing down potential suspects based on age, location, and timelines of the crimes. This process took time and careful analysis, but it provided something the case had lacked for decades: a real direction. Eventually, the list of possible individuals became smaller and more focused. Surveillance and additional evidence helped confirm suspicions. After years of fear, failed leads, and unanswered questions, investigators finally identified a suspect. The breakthrough didn't just solve a case. It showed how modern technology could bring justice, even after decades of silence. One detective working on the case began exploring genealogy databases. These platforms were designed for people searching for family connections, not criminal investigations. But they contained millions of genetic profiles voluntarily submitted by users. The idea was simple but powerful. Instead of looking for an exact match, look for relatives. If the suspect's DNA was uploaded, even indirectly, it might reveal family connections. From there, investigators could build a family tree backward and narrow down possible identities. It was an unconventional approach, and at first, there was uncertainty about whether it would work. But the decision was made to try. A DNA profile from the crime scenes was uploaded through controlled methods, not directly linked to any person, but used to search for partial matches. The results came back, and they began to form a pattern. Several distant relatives appeared, not direct matches, but enough to start building connections. From there, investigators began constructing family trees, comparing ages, locations, and backgrounds. Slowly, the list narrowed. From many possible names, it came down to a small group of men who fit the profile. Age range, location history, background patterns. Everything was carefully analyzed. And then one name stood out: Joseph James D'Angelo. He lived in California. He matched the age range, and his history aligned with several key points in the investigation. From that moment, surveillance began. Investigators watched quietly. They studied his routine. They collected discarded items carefully, ensuring they could obtain a valid DNA sample without alerting him. At one point, they recovered an item from his trash. That sample would become the turning point of the entire investigation. The DNA was tested. It matched. After more than 40 years, the identity behind the Golden State Killer had finally been uncovered. The arrest happened at his home. A retired man, living quietly, was suddenly taken into custody. To those who had spent decades chasing him, the moment felt almost unreal. The man they had been searching for all their careers was finally sitting in front of them. For survivors, the news brought mixed emotions. Some felt relief, others felt disbelief, and many experienced a strange emotional conflict. Seeing an aging, fragile man accused of crimes that once terrorized entire communities. But the evidence was strong. Investigators confirmed that DNA linked him directly to multiple crime scenes. The case that had once seemed impossible to solve was now supported by scientific proof. What made the situation even more shocking was how long he had remained undetected. He had lived a normal life, built relationships, raised a family, and all the while, the past remained hidden beneath the surface. Former colleagues and acquaintances were also stunned. Some had known him casually. Others had worked alongside him. In hindsight, they struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the crimes he was accused of committing. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was how close authorities may have come to identifying him earlier. There were moments during the original investigation where small signs appeared, but nothing was followed up strongly enough to lead to a breakthrough at the time. Those missed opportunities became painful reflections for investigators later. As the case developed further, it became clear that the suspect had a strong understanding of police procedures. That knowledge may have helped him avoid detection for years. He knew how investigations worked, how evidence was collected, and how to avoid leaving clear traces. That awareness made him even harder to catch. But ultimately, technology changed everything. DNA genealogy became the key that unlocked the case. A method that didn't exist during the original investigations finally provided answers that traditional policing could not. After the arrest, legal proceedings began. Not all charges could be prosecuted due to time limitations under the law, but the most serious cases were still pursued using available evidence. For survivors, court appearances became a moment of confrontation. Many saw the man responsible for their trauma face to face for the first time in decades. Some described it as closure. Others said it simply confirmed what they had always known deep down, that the past had finally caught up. Detectives who worked the case for years reflected on the outcome with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. After decades of searching, the identity was finally known. The mystery that had defined their careers was resolved. But the impact of the crimes remained. Entire communities had been changed permanently. Families had lived in fear for years. Survivors carried memories that could never be erased. And yet, there was also a sense of progress, because the case proved something important. Even the most complex, long unsolved crimes can eventually be solved. not through luck alone, but through persistence, technology, and the willingness to try new methods when old ones fail. Today, the Golden State Killer case stands as one of the most significant breakthroughs in modern criminal investigation history. It changed how cold cases are approached. It showed the power of DNA beyond traditional databases, and it opened the door to solving cases once thought impossible. But it also left behind a haunting question. If one case took more than 40 years to solve, how many others are still waiting in silence? Before you go, make sure to subscribe for more real-life investigations, unexplained mysteries, and deep case breakdowns explained in a simple and human way.